Order in the court. The judge's voice boomed, his gavel striking with force. The room buzzed with whispers, cameras clicked, and tension hung heavy in the air. At the defense table sat a black woman, calm, composed, her wrists bound in chains that clinked softly each time she shifted. Her name was Alicia Carter. And though the world saw her as the accused that day, the truth was far greater. Moments later, the entire courtroom would see it too. The prosecutor painted her as reckless, as dangerous, as someone who didn't know her place. Alicia said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence, wielded with dignity, was more powerful than shouting. But her very calmness enraged those who sought to break her. 2 officers stepped forward. One barked, "Stand when spoken to." Alicia did not move. The slap came swift and sharp. The sound cracked through the courtroom like a whip. Gasps filled the gallery, reporters scribbled frantically, and even the judge shifted in his seat, uneasy. But Alicia, she did not fall. She did not cry. She simply lifted her head, her cheek burning red, and locked eyes with the bench. "Is this justice?" she asked, her voice steady, echoing against the marble walls. The entire courtroom froze. Alicia's journey to this moment had begun. Decades earlier in a Baltimore neighborhood where the law was something people feared rather than trusted. As a girl, she had watched neighbors dragged away unfairly, watched landlords exploit the poor, watched police treat dignity like it was optional. One night, when she was just 13, she had asked her mother, "Why do they get to decide everything?" Her mother, a woman of unshakable faith, answered softly, "Because they sit where the power sits." But maybe one day you will too. That seed had never left her. She studied harder than anyone expected. She worked jobs that barely paid for textbooks. She earned scholarships, survived sleepless nights, and emerged not just as a lawyer, but as one of the brightest legal minds her community had ever seen. But bright lights attract shadows. Her relentless fight against corruption made her enemies wealthy. Businessmen, politicians, even officers who feared her honesty. They twisted laws, turned allies into enemies, and finally fabricated charges to silence her. So there she was, not at the bench, but in chains, or so they thought. When the officer's slap echoed through the courtroom, Alicia rose slowly to her feet. "Your Honor," she said firmly, her voice ringing like a bell, "you have allowed violence in your court. That is contempt not against me, but against the very law you swore to uphold." Gasps spread again. The judge shifted nervously, tugging at his collar. The officers froze, waiting for direction, but no direction came. Instead, the judge's face grew pale. His hands trembled as he reached for his gavel, then stopped. Without a word, he stood, turned, and walked out of the courtroom. His robe swished behind him, his chair empty. The silence that followed was deafening. All eyes turned to Alicia. She looked around slowly. The jury, the spectators, the officers. Then, with deliberate calm, she stepped forward. Her chains rattled with each step, but they did not sound like shackles anymore. They sounded like drums, counting down the seconds to something historic. She climbed the steps to the bench. She placed her hands on the polished wood, then gently set the gavel in her palm, and then she sat. For the first time in that courthouse's history, a black woman sat in the judge's seat, still wearing chains, but holding power greater than anyone else in the room. "This courtroom will hear truth today," she declared, her voice steady and commanding. Not intimidation, not corruption. Justice. The gallery erupted, some outraged, others clapping, still others stunned into silence. The officers lowered their eyes, shamed by their own actions. Even the prosecutor, once smug, could only stare in disbelief as Alicia began to speak. She quoted statutes. She recited precedents from memory. She dismantled the false case against her with precision and brilliance, line by line, until the lies collapsed like a house of cards. By the time she finished, the crowd was no longer divided between defendant and accuser. They were united by the truth that had unfolded before them. The gavel struck once more, not in corruption, not in cruelty, but in justice. Alicia did not leave that courtroom in chains. She left in triumph. News outlets across the country carried the story of the woman who took the judge's seat. Communities rallied. Leaders called her courageous. And when her name appeared on ballots months later, it was no surprise that she won by a landslide. The next time Alicia entered that same courtroom, the bailiff's voice rang out, "All rise." Judge Alicia Carter presiding, and those who had once tried to silence her were forced to stand.